Welcome to, I don't know if you guys read the description or not, but sexiest breakout of all time. Talking about event calendars, and my name is Mo. I am the student ministries pastor at Faith Tri-Cities in Pasco. Wherever that is, I'm still uncertain. Like, my only context for Eastern Washington, because we just moved from the west side to the east side, was either Spokane or Yakima. So when the first time I came out to the Tri-Cities, I drove past Yakima, and I was like, bro, are we in Idaho by now? Where are we? So if you've ever been, we're just out there in the middle of nowhere. But anyways, this is my wife, Jessie. She's here to hold me accountable on all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today. But real quick, before we really get into anything, I'm going to do a little giveaway situation. So I've got a couple books here that I feel like are important to this particular topic that I'm going to be giving out. And it's a chance to plug a resource that we use. I know you can't see it super well, but it's called Flocknote. And Flocknote is a mass text and mass email program. It's all online. They have an app that you can use as well to use for small groups, to announce things, deadlines. I mean, you can do you guys are familiar with Constant Contact or email, the fancy ones, the really good emails. You can do that through Flocknote. Giving, attendance, all kinds of stuff. They're really, really cool. And they work with any church, any size. And so if you are looking for a way to better communicate to your people, to your students, to parents, or whoever, and organize things, track things, and make sure that all that communication is staying appropriate and on the up and up, Flocknote is great. So if you'll text Summit23, all one word, to the number 84576, I'm going to give out some books, actually, that I'll reference here in just a moment, to a couple people that I'll draw from random. And just seeing everybody in here, you got a pretty good shot of walking away with a book, just saying. So I think that's pretty rad, but I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Pastor Zach asked me to talk about this breakout. I don't even know why, honestly. I'll give you two disclaimers, okay? First of all, I don't have the most type A personality on the planet. I operate out of what I like to call little piles, okay? They're like little sorted piles, somewhere between clutter and clean. That's kind of where I operate. Hey, welcome, come on in. Yeah, you're in a good spot. You're in a good spot to do this as well. I'm going to give out some books. Little sorted piles kind of out through my office, not super messy and stuff, but definitely if I clean it, I have to be very intentional. If my wife cleans it, I have no idea where anything is, but she does. So praise God, she knows what's going on. So I don't have the most type A personality on the planet, but I have learned that getting organized is a skill that anybody can learn and benefit from, honestly. I've run into a couple people that use personality as a cop-out when it comes to getting organized and communicating well, You might have some of these in your student ministry. It might be you. I don't know. You're just free spirit, kind of go with the flow, and that's awesome, man. I definitely felt that way at a time, especially in college. I like to think that I put the pro in procrastination, but I've learned that ministry needs to be organized, right? I think for a lot of younger leaders, and I'm just going to throw this out there, put it on you, see if it fits right. We got to understand that irresponsibility is not a personality trait. Irresponsibility is a mark of immaturity. Now, I was going to cut that line out because I was like, man, that's brutal. And then I came to conference and I've heard some of the conversations that we've had. And up until I read part of this book, which is phenomenal, I really hesitated in even giving it away because I want it. But it talks a little bit about maturity in leadership and what that looks like and why that's important in a way that you probably would not have heard before. So that's the first disclaimer, not super organized. You want somebody who is organized, go hang out with Pastor Chris Gray. That girl is organized, okay? The second thing is, I'm not the world's greatest event planner. I'm not trending on anything, social media or otherwise. I'm actually trying to get off the grid as soon as possible, bomb shelter in Montana. That's my goal, you know what I mean? I want to get off the grid. However, through consistency and over-communication and being strategic with our calendar, I feel like our events have a very high success rate. I don't know how you measure success for your events, and I'll get to some of that a little bit later. But I just feel like our events have really captured a lot of momentum, and we have a lot of students that are coming, and our students are inviting their friends. And so Pastor Zach asked me to come talk about this a little bit through a practice that we do, which is an event calendar. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, the boring stuff, where the rubber meets the road, I thought I would share with you a couple values. They're things that I've learned, things that I've experienced over 10 years of doing this practice and doing some of this stuff. And the first value is that I feel like we've got to give our people better options. When it comes to events, when it comes to participating in the life of our churches, we've got to give our people better options because we are competing with school with sports, family events, community events, work schedules, church schedules, and a number of other things. There's all kinds of things happening all around us all the time. And by planning your events way in ahead, you give yourself a chance of being chosen first, right? If you can throw something out there before a bunch of other things populate our people's calendar, you might get chosen first. And I think one of the reasons why students and families choose not to invest in our events is because everyone else in our community is probably beating us to the punch. You think about like the school district, man, they probably are already working on and solidifying their calendar for the next school year, and it'll be available in the summertime. So here's the thing, all right? You know your events are successful when families in your church start planning their lives around your ministry and not the other way around. I think all of us have probably experienced this in some way, shape, or form, that church has become the thing people cut from their schedules when life gets busy, unless we give them a schedule worth following. Okay? So we have to think of ministry stop thinking of ministry, I should say, from week to week and start thinking of it as season to season. What are the seasons in your communities, in your churches? And I know everybody's is different, right? All of our churches are different sizes, and we have different cultural kind of influences around us. I know the Tri-Cities is very agricultural, so everything flows around harvest, planting and harvest, and the different crops coming through. So we have to think of ministry as seasonal. There's this event that takes place in our community in the Tri-Cities. It's called Middleton's Fall Festival. Have you ever been there? You know what I'm talking about? It's crazy, man. It's like the Disney World of the Tri-Cities. I think they have close to 60 to 75,000 people that come out there every year. And I know that because the Middletons attend our church and because a lot of our young people help them out with that. My wife helps out. I help out there. It's awesome. I want to be out there. But that impacts our overall attendance and our ability to pull things off. So when Middleton's Fall Festival is going on, we try to keep that in mind, right? Because we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. So that's the first one. We got to give our people better options. The second one is we've got to over-communicate. We got to over-communicate everything. I don't know about you, but I could live the rest of my life without another Zoom call or QR code or text subscription or promotional email or social media. Like I said earlier, I'm trying to get off the grid. I'm not trying to blast social media or whatever, but we're bombarded with stuff every day. Our people are bombarded with stuff every day. How many of you guys got hit up by a random politician that got your phone number somehow this last election cycle? It's like, who are you? How did you get my phone number? Right? Our people are getting blasted by that stuff too. I'm shocked at the number of text messages that my younger colleagues do not answer in a day. I was hanging out with our kids pastor. Her name's Corinne, and she's like, yeah, I've got 65 unread text messages that I've got today. I'm like, how's that possible, right? I think we're learning that instant communication isn't so instant anymore, One source of information is really, really easy to miss. Promoting something a week in advance does not give you enough time, right? It doesn't give your families enough time, okay? So we got to make the most of every channel of communication and media platform that we have at our disposal and use them strategically. I'm not saying that you should spam people, because that's not good. They're already getting spammed. But put it out there on everything. If you have social media accounts through your church, cool, use that. You want to use a mass text thing? I recommend Flognote, but you can do a Google Voice number. There's lots of different ways. Just an email isn't going to cut it. Just a flyer isn't going to cut it. But do flyers. Do all it. Figure out ways to use all those things and get it in the hands of your people. I don't know if this is true for you, but it is certainly true for me. Out of sight is really out of mind. If I don't see it on a regular basis, if I don't have it in my hand, if I can't instantly refer to it without having to dig through my phone, I'm going to miss it, right? Even my calendar, I miss things from time to time. So how many of you guys have ever experienced this? There's always that one family that 3 days after the deadline for summer camp has closed, they hit you up and hey, how do I sign my kid up for summer camp? And it's where have you been? Where have you been? There's kind of always that one family. And I would say for us that still happens, but it happens a whole lot less now. And I'll talk a little bit about how we have navigated those types of situations because those types of things stress me out, right? And if anything, I've learned that planning an event calendar way in advance will lower the stress that you experience when it comes to your events, when it comes to your services, okay? So, is it too late to sign my kids up for camp? Yes, but we can work around that, okay? Here's another thing that is really important to me, which is always work ahead. I've been the youth pastor at really small churches, church plants. I've been the youth pastor at really big churches and everywhere in between. And I learned that if you're always working ahead, you never experience the stress of falling behind, right? You guys ever feel like you just can't quite get caught up, Anybody, just me? You ever leave work thinking about all the things you didn't get done that day, Thinking about, all those things waiting for me when I go in the next morning. Like, I hate not being able to be present with my wife and my kids when I'm off work because my mind is elsewhere. Can I get a witness? Does anybody know what I'm talking about, right? That dreaded phone call from your lead pastor about something that they need you to do, and you're like, oh man, it's cutting into who knows what, family time, who knows, right? You're trying to sermon prep. What is it about you finally sit down to do something productive, then everybody starts texting you and calling you? What is that? It's like, where have you guys been all day? I could have handled this earlier, but you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not able to do ministry because you're doing other stuff for ministry? You got a kid that's suffering or a parent that needs help, and it's like, I got to set up for this game night, y'all. I'm sorry. I think just the most important thing is you got to make the most of your time and energy. And those are the most valuable resources that you have really as a person, not just a youth leader. It's just make the most of your time and your energy. And when you do the work up front, when you invest in thinking seasonally, and when you think about just the ebb and flow of your own churches and how there's slower seasons and busier seasons and all that stuff, when you work hard up front first, you get to reap the fruits of that labor later, I went to school with a guy. I'll tell you a quick story. He was in my graduating class from Bible college, and his name was Jonathan Woods. No joke, he's probably a millionaire today, if not a multimillionaire. But he had this really bizarre practice that I didn't even realize he was doing until right around the time that I graduated from college, because if I would have been able to steal this, I would have done this. So Jonathan would get a syllabus for every class, okay? He would disappear for 3 weeks. We wouldn't see him. He would just be gone. We wouldn't know where he'd be. But what he would do is he would take the syllabus, he would read all of his textbooks, he would do all the assignments that he could within reason, and within the first 3 weeks of the semester, and then when I started seeing Jonathan come to class, he would come in, no notebook, no laptop, no nothing, and just sit in class and just enjoy the class. And he actually became our commencement speaker because the guy just had a brilliant mind. And I was like, wow, that's insane. Number one, I don't know how he did it, but number two, what an awesome way to live, that if you do the work up front, then you get to just enjoy life, And I just saw him walking around. He could stay up as late as he wanted to, hang out with his girlfriend, go home and visit friends. Why? Because the work was already done. The guy could just live his life. And that's why he's making way more money than me right now. So always work ahead, okay? It's a big deal. If you can do that, get yourself in to do that. In a place where you can do that, let's do that. So, and finally, the fourth value is maximize spontaneity. I feel like one of the best assets that some of you may have as young leaders or even seasoned leaders, if you manage your time well, is the ability to be spontaneous. And what I mean by that is having the time to take students out to coffee, have lunch with a leader, Friday night football games, choir concerts, or hospital visits, counseling appointments, ministry assignments without that guilt or that feeling like, man, this is cutting into family time or this is affecting other areas of my job. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? You ever kind of been there, that wrestling with that tension? So when I say maximize spontaneity, what I don't mean is just always be spontaneous. I'm be spontaneous in a healthy manner. Really think of it as availability, okay? You might be wondering I'm already doing this stuff, Pastor Mo. I'm the bomb at hanging out with students or whatever. Cool, but when was the last time you double booked yourself? You ever double book yourself in a situation where you're trying to hang out with one person, and then you say yes to another thing, and then 3 days go by and you're like, oh, crud, now I have to back out on one or on both? Are you guys carrying the stress of saying yes to everything, right? Do you feel like you just have to say yes to everything? Lead pastor comes, he's leaning on you, or maybe you feel like you can't say no, right? I think sometimes we feel like as associates or support roles in our churches, we can't say no. Why would we want to say no to our lead pastor, right? We want to be available. Are your students suffering because you are leading from a place of lack and not a place of abundance? I don't think God has ever intended us to just run on fumes all the time, right? He wants us to run full tank all the time. So one of the resources I'm going to give out, I'm going to do a couple shameless plugs, is a book called Essentialism. You guys ever read this one? Nobody? Cool. All right, so I will say this just as a disclaimer again. I don't know necessarily about this guy's spiritual background. This is in the business section at Barnes & Noble. But there are some credible lessons to learn from this book, and I'll give you two of my biggest takeaways, okay? The first one is, as leaders, if you're the full-time youth pastor at your church, or maybe you're doing it on a volunteer basis, part-time, whatever your grind is, the best thing that you can do as a discipline is do only the things that only you can do. Do only the things that only you can do, and then delegate everything else out, which is easier said than done. I did an exercise with my team a number of years ago where we just got a big whiteboard, and I said, hey, let's write down every responsibility we have. Write down everything that we're doing, okay? Write everything down. So we filled up, I did it, my staff did it, we filled up a whole whiteboard with all this stuff. And I said, okay, now I want you to go in, I want you to circle 3 things that are the most essential. This was post-COVID or pre-COVID. Most essential for your job, all right? What is the absolute most important things you do? You get 3, and they're like, oh man. And so they all circled 3 things, and then I said this, okay, now I want you to do this for me. As your pastor, what are 3 things that you feel like only I can do? Which was a good exercise for them. So we had a short list of things that only we can do as a staff, and a big list of things that we were doing that we could delegate to other people. This book helps you get into a rhythm like that. The second thing from this book is that if you do not control your time, something or someone else will, right? If you do not control your time, something or someone else will. In regards to saying no to your lead pastor, here's something that I've learned. Again, a number of years ago, I was at a church that was really passionate about youth choirs. Loved them. I have 0 experience in youth choirs. I mean, I can sing and stuff, but I was never in choir. That was just not for me. And so they came to me after I was already a couple years in, after we were like really rolling, and they were like, hey, we want you to do a youth choir. And they kind of explained it. And I said, okay, that's great. I don't have the skill set to do it. So if you're wanting me to do it, and I pulled out this guy, which I'll send around here in a second. I pulled out my old event calendar and I said, what are some things that you'd like me to cut to be able to like carry that? And they were like, oh man, you're already doing a lot. I didn't say no necessarily, but I showed my pastor where my priorities were. And I think it helped him understand like the things that I'm doing. Our lead pastors don't always see all the work we do behind the scenes, right? They don't always know all the stuff that we're the time and energy we're putting into things. And so having something like this can help you kind of not necessarily validate or justify your job, but it's a good tool to just say like, hey, what are some things you'd like me to not do to be able to do that? Or at the very least, will you help me resource someone who can do what you'd like me to do? And I'll support them, I'll come along beside them. I'll make sure that, your expectations are met and the objective is met, but it won't necessarily hang on me, right? So it's just a way of delegating. And then the other book that I have, again, I picked it up pretty recently. It's called Rare Leadership, which is an acronym that the authors use. But I wanted to read the back, man, because I felt like this is so good. It says, at the heart of this dynamic is emotional maturity, a quality that the greatest leaders possess, combining cutting-edge brain science with a bunch of other stuff. This book shows you how to cultivate emotional maturity in yourself and others, promote a strong group identity as you all strive together, and increase productivity to get the most from your team. And I thought, yeah, that's what's up. If I could operate in those realms, that would be fantastic. So those are just kind of 4 values that I run with. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of like event calendars, I just thought I'd throw it out there. Any thoughts or questions, anything that I can clarify now before we get into the nitty-gritty? Nothing. Cool. I'm going to send this around, Jess. You can send this around. This is an old calendar. I pulled a Zach Cash, and I had a whole stack of our newer ones that I was going to bring, and then I forgot them. So that was an old one that I found. But this is essentially the resource that we create 3 times a year, just our event calendar. And I feel like it's one of our best practices. It allows all of our people, both in a printed copy, hundreds of physical copies actually, as well as a digital copy, to see in advance everything that our ministry is doing within a particular season. So it covers 4 months at a time. As you're looking on there, you'll see like our sermon series that we do, which we do sermon series 2 months at a time. So guaranteed we're going to talk about a topic from 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and I can explain why that is in a second. Registration information for events, deadlines, Small groups, so if we're doing like special themes, like if it's May the 4th and that's on a Wednesday, we're doing that Star Wars theme, you know what I'm saying? So it gets that into people's hands. Or if we're going to do pajamas night or something like that. So special events, if you're going to do something on a Friday night or a Saturday, we do that once a month. Special services, so we do something called Invite Night, which is in the name. It's a safe place for you to invite your friends so that they can feel like they belong before they believe. We do something called Squad Wars, which is all small group oriented, but it's like a bunch of competitions and stuff that you can invite your friends to get you connected in a small group. Special Sundays like Easter or Fall Kickoff. We do events for parents, our Flock Note subscription, and social media handles, student leadership groups, mission trips, camps, retreats, whatever it is that we're doing in a season, we try to throw it on a calendar. I literally took this from the school district. I stole it. I made it mine. Ha! Take that, okay? I will say that it requires a ton of work up front. And you got to find those, again, rhythms in ministry where you have the time where things are a little bit slower to invest a bunch of time and research into creating something like this. So I made a quick checklist just to kind of show you in general how we do this, and then we can answer specific questions. I would love to hear stuff that you're doing. If you have questions about something that you see on there, I'd love just to kind of have conversations. But here's the first thing that we do, is we gather all of the calendars at our disposal. So school calendars in the Tri-Cities, we have Pasco, Richland, and Kennewick. They're all separate school calendars. They have different, spring breaks and stuff like that. We also have Liberty Christian School in the Tri-Cities, and they have their own spring break. When I was in Edmonds, this was a nightmare because we had Edmonds, we had Shoreline, we had Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace, like you name it. There were so many school calendars, but you can usually find these online about midsummer for the following school year. So school calendars, sports calendars are a little bit harder to find. It kind of depends on where you're at, but you can usually get an idea of when the different sports per season are in practice, when their games are, homecoming, senior night, all that type of stuff, just to kind of get an idea of what's going on out there. And then church calendars. We use Planning Center. I don't know what you've got, but if your church does some kind of calendar, even if it's a big fatty like written out one in your receptionist front office or whatever, like cool, snap a picture of that. Overlap all these things with your personal calendar. So Jesse and I, we share a calendar on our phones and on our computers. And so we'll take a look at our birthdays, anniversaries, all that type of stuff that's coming up. And I just lay them all out, man. I lay them all out and I start to look for the sweet spots. Where's the good? Where's the sweet spot at where there's nothing else going on? I'm not overlapping any other church calendars. I'm not butting up against any other holidays. I'm aware of like what's happening in my community, so that I'm not planning a big Friday night event on a big homecoming night or something, or a rivalry game. I want to set myself up for success. So gather all the calendars, look for the sweet spots, the best, most opportune moments among all those different calendars. And then I have a template, which, by the way, if you guys did the Flock Note thing, I'm going to send you this presentation, our templates, all that good stuff. If you have questions, it's actually two-way. So if you have a question like a week from now and you're like, oh, shoot, I should have asked this, you know how that goes. You get into something like this and you're like, you don't have any questions and you're leaving like, I should have asked this. Cool, you can do that on the Flock Note thing. And it's all safe and secure. I'm not going to spam you, I promise you, but I'll send you everything that we've got as far as our templates. I think I have a 2-month template and a 4-month and a 12-month, but I'll talk about that in a second. So we start plugging in events, dates, and ideas into a blank template. It's just an Excel spreadsheet that we use. And after I get all that stuff plugged in, I will double check first with our church administrator, our executive administrator, because she will catch things that I miss. And because she is administrating a lot more things than I am, she'll bring me up to speed on some things that I might consider. So I really gain a lot from her wisdom. And then once I've double checked it with her, I'll triple check it with my wife. So I'll bring home a unfinished, kind of rough draft to her, and we'll sit down and we'll look at it, or she'll look at it and just like, oh, we can't do this here. You need to move it because my sisters have some kind of thing. I don't know. Right? Always triple check with your spouse. That's just do that, okay? Mostly because she would kill me and eat me if I mess up our lives. But double check, triple check, make sure everything's good to go. And then before you publish it, confirm. So just make sure you confirm. And if that means sending in a deposit for a retreat, calling up the skating rink or whatever, the bowling alley or whatever, and getting that deposit in. Make sure you send reservations for enough people. Just making sure that everything is good to go before you publish the event. Why? because we ran into situations, if you don't do it beforehand, it'll sneak up on you, and then it's like, oh shoot, now this event that's been on my calendar for the last 3 months, I now have to cancel. Yikes, right? So before you even print those bad boys, make sure you lock in all those details. Make your final edits, print, and then promote the snot out of it. So at our Wednesday night gatherings and on Sunday mornings, I have a stack of these. I have them at our information station in our main lobby. I have them in the front office, our youth space upstairs, our multi-purpose room, which is where we do our youth gatherings. I have them all over the place. So if I run into a parent, cool, man, so good to meet you and your family. Hey, you should check this out. This is all the stuff we got going on for the next 3 months. And they're like, oh, cool, this is so great. Now my kid could be at everything against their will, like now they have no excuse, But we used to promote it. Whenever we have a service host on Wednesday nights, they stand up, do you guys have an event calendar? You don't? Oh, you should check out all this dope stuff. It's on here. And they just start reading off stuff, and kids get excited about it. So we use that for promotional type things. I'll hang one up in my office, again, out of sight, out of mind. I'm looking at my own calendar, and then I put one on the fridge at our house so that we can always see it at home. And that's essentially what we do in a nutshell, is plan in advance, make sure we're not overlapping things, make sure that we're working with our facilities teams, with the other departments in our church, so we're not snatching up. Don't do like an event this Saturday before Mother's Day. Don't do that. I've done that. Don't do it. It's a bad idea, okay? The cool thing about this is, and there's lots of advantages and lots of other stuff. I've got all kinds of other things that we can talk about in regards to successful events and all that stuff, but is you will lead the charge as a youth ministry on getting your events out way in advance, it'll literally change the culture of your church. And other ministries will start doing the same, and then the main office will start doing the same, and we'll start giving people in our communities better options, and they'll choose us. I have a handful of parents throughout the years that have come to me like in the early spring, and they're like, do you have the summer calendar ready? I say, I'm working on it. They're like, okay, I want it as soon as you have it done, because we want to take a vacation, but we don't want to miss what you're doing. And I'm like, that's when you know your events are successful, right there, okay? So I know that was like a flyby of all that good stuff. Love to hear some thoughts, some questions from you guys about some of the situations that you've experienced. Does that kind of explain what you saw as it was going around? Does that give you an idea of some things that you can do? What are you guys thinking of? Yeah.
So you're planning out 4 months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Are you coming into the year with, like, there's events that are all the time. We do this every year or around the same time. But are you only planning out those 4 months, and then somewhere during those 4 months you prepare the next 4 months? Or are you ready for the year and just giving it in pieces as it comes out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me go all the way full circle on this. I used to do a yearly calendar. What I discovered when you did a yearly calendar is that I wasn't giving my lead pastor enough space to follow the Lord. Like if he wanted to shut things down for a week of prayer and fasting, or if he felt like he wanted to throw in a missions trip, or whatever the case may be. So I discovered that like 12 months is too much, because I ended up rescheduling or canceling more events than I would have liked to. 2 months was too short because, like, again, school calendars are a year long, sports calendars, the full season, all the practices, all the team meetings, all that stuff. And so we started doing 4 months at a time, because it kind of also went with our small group structure. So we do like fall small groups for all families and all different kinds of people. At Faith, we do Faith midweek. So we have like a midweek service in the fall that runs a X amount of weeks, and then in the spring and the summer. As of right now, we are planned out all the way through August, and we've been planned out all the way through August since like September of last year. We're going to have another meeting in a few weeks where we go from September all the way to September of next year as a church and start getting just general information on the calendar. The cool thing about doing this at Faith, which I've only been there for like 2.5 years, is now we're starting to do it as department heads. So I'm going to meet with our kids pastor, I'm going to meet with our women's ministry director and our men's ministry director, and we're going to figure out how can we create, and this just excites me because I think this is capital C big church stuff and capital K kingdom thinking. How can we create events where we can support one another? So instead of doing like a men's event, a women's event, kids event, youth event, let's do a family event. And we can all pool resources, we can all communicate through our channels, we can all promote the same things, and let's see what kind of turnout we get on that, which really excites me because it starts to suck in some of the Mickey Mouse ears of all the different church ministries, you know what I mean? So we're always working ahead and kind of thinking ahead. 4 months also gives you the ability to switch things up if you need to. So like, right now, I know that our summer camps are going to be in July, but if something were to happen because it's not on the calendar yet, I can make that quick switch before I print them out, like mid-April. So mid-April, I'll have our summer calendar done. By the time we get to August, I will have the fall calendar like reformatted. So 3 times a year, I'm doing it like in December for January through April. I'm working in March and April for May through August, and then I'm working right after summer camp, kind of before school starts for the fall. And that's kind of the flow that I get into. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I was talking so long, I was forgetting to. What was the question again? I don't know, I'm talking forever. No, that's good though. Yeah.
How ahead are you on your sermons?
Yeah, so I keep a running list of sermons on my phone. I'm pretty bad at I just write it down on my phone real quick. I have a couple in mind for the summer, but I'm also in a process of bringing on another person on staff who's going to be kind of our junior high guy. And so I wanted to talk with him. I feel like the best sermon series that I've ever done were ones that collaboratively, my team and I, what are some felt needs? What are some conversations that are trending, like, what's everybody talking about? Or what are some problems that a lot of our kids are experiencing? And then we'll try to preach to those things, because those are the questions they're asking, right? I don't want to stand up there and answer questions that nobody's asking. So I've got a ton of different ideas. We're in one right now called March Madness. So actually we split up our student ministry into 4 teams, and they're leading all the services through the month of March. And then the last week of March, because there's 5 Wednesdays, our faith interns, our school of ministry interns, and my leaders are going to run that one. So I get the whole month off, which is dope. April, we're doing a sermon series called Who is God, Who God Is, which is just kind of based on the idea that we talk a lot about who God is. But where are some places in Scripture where people are like, who are you? Like Moses, for example, burning bush experience. Who should I tell them that sent me? Tell them I am that I am. And so breaking down what that looks like. I'm trying to think of some other, we have a ton in a hat, I guess, in a pool that we just kind of develop as we go. One thing that I didn't say is in this whole process of planning an event calendar, when we know what our sermon series are going to be, we start working on sermon graphics right away. Event graphics. So summer camp, we're doing an event in May. It's called the Lockdown 2.0, Cinco de Mayo Mayhem. And so we'll create that's on May 5th. So I'm very excited about it. There's going to be tacos. So we'll build the graphics for that before we even publish the event, and then we'll put it in like a Dropbox kind of a file for our church people that are doing our app and our website. So if they ever need graphics, the description and the graphics are right there, and they can just pull from them right away. They don't even have to ask me. They just go grab them. So that's part of that. But I try to work sermon series out in advance, but not super far in advance. Just I want to be interruptible. Yeah.
Do you have quarterly events, or how often do you do special events that aren't on a Wednesday?
We try to limit ourselves to once a month. I used to be in a really event-heavy church, and it almost sucked the life out of me. And we try to do it once a month. I feel like that gives you enough time, enough space in between to kind of let your facility rest, because if you're doing a big event and it's a big mess and you got to clean it up, you don't want to do that a ton because it's going to start wearing and tearing on your campus or whatever. But we also want to promote it well.
Yeah.
So we limit ourselves to one kind of special event a month, but we also sometimes turn our Wednesday night gatherings into special events. So we just did a Valentine's banquet on the 15th, which was the day after Valentine's Day, but so all the Valentine's stuff was half off, yeah. But we turned that Wednesday into a special event. We did a big formal dinner and stuff, and come invite your friends. We probably had over 100 people show up to it. It was crazy. Christmas parties, we'll do those on a Wednesday. So the reason why I do sermon series 2 months at a time is it gives you enough time to really flesh out the topic or the conversation that you're having with your students and kind of keep that conversation going. But it also allows us, again, to do an invite night, which is in the name, invite your friends. Let's get a bunch of people in here. Let's make connection with them. The following week, we'll do a squad wars. So let's get those people into a small group. So now I got my 8th grade guys small group with my 8th grade guys group leaders. And then we'll actually introduce the new sermon series that night. And then for the next 6 or 7 weeks, we'll talk about it. And we have the general idea, the main passage, a lot of the main points and that type of stuff written out in advance. And then the very last Wednesday of every sermon series, or whenever you guys do your gatherings, we'll spend an entire night to reflection. So I'll do a brief recap, and then it's all small groups. And so we'll come up with questions. They'll ask us questions. It's all about reflection on that night. So ultimately, it kind of feels like we do special events all throughout the month, but it's already on our regular rhythm of Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And then we'll do one Saturday event, something like that. Yeah.
What do your invite nights look like?
Oh, it's chaos, dude. It's crazy, man. We try to set up kind of 2 spaces. One that just feels really comfortable and safe. So we'll do free food. Not like crazy, we're not doing steak and lobster or whatever, but we'll set out some snacks and some food, kind of create a lounge area where people can just kind of chill and hang out. Then we'll set up a game room. So our gathering space allows us to really convert it into any kind of shape or setup that we want. So we'll bring out all the basketball, pop-a-shot things, ping pong tables, foods. We'll just set up all that stuff. And then we'll do some big structured type games, neon dodgeball. I just built the world's largest 9-square. It's stupid big. I don't know.
Yourself?
Yeah, I don't know what I was doing.
Wow.
You can fit 4 people in every square. It's crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. So we'll set that up, and we'll do some giveaways, some light giveaways. I try to really challenge my connections team or the person running check-in to capture that information and get them plugged into Flocknote right away, because we can send them a text message the very next day. Hey, thanks for coming and hanging out with us, man. Make sure you come back next week. Sometimes we'll also do our high school group Thursday night after that. So it's hey, you were here tonight. Hope you loved it. Hope you met somebody. Hey, tomorrow night at our house or whatever, we're doing a high school group and you can come to that too. So it's all about trying to connect them to as many people as possible in a safe place. I will say this, and I try to avoid a lot of bait and switch scenarios. So we will do a talk that night, but it's more about who we are and the culture of our church. And a little bit less of a full-blown gospel kind of presentation. And I know that might sound a little backwards, but the goal of those invite nights really is about connection. It's a relational connection. I had a youth mentor of mine said there is no discipleship without relationship. So we really try to build that relationship, because I feel like kids are a little bit leery when you start preaching at them right away and you don't know anything about them. It's not to say that there isn't a spot for that type of evangelism, but we try to do it relationally through conversations and stuff. The great thing is, and again, I have a whole list of things on here of how I feel like we should measure successful events. Is I want a kid that doesn't just come to our special events. I want a kid that comes to special events and starts coming to our youth ministry regularly, and then starts coming to our Sunday morning services, and then before you know it, they're giving their lives to Jesus. I want them in the greater body, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Again, I've talked so long, I've now forgotten what the question was. Okay, cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions out there? How about you guys? What are some events that you guys are doing that you feel like are going really well for you?
Well, just ping-ponging off of the invite night. We've been talking and struggling with our invite nights, because it's we want them to get the touch of Jesus, of course, in those nights, but how do we not shove it down their throats? I love that it's creating a safe space for them.
I like that you talked about what your culture is like.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining that's something that we've been struggling with our students, trying to because they bring friends to those events, but those friends have never stepped foot in the church before.
Sure.
And so not assuming.
So they don't know that at worship you gotta stand.
Yeah.
When someone's teaching, you're not trying to lick the person next to you, kind of a thing. And there's some protocol to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just having this conversation with another youth pastor out in the lobby earlier, but there's a great resource out there that kind of changed my thinking on evangelism. It's called Reviving Evangelism. It's put out by the Barna Group. It's a pretty quick read, but essentially after surveying all these different kinds of people around the country, young and old, people that consider themselves atheists, to all the way to people that consider themselves like passionate followers of Jesus. They found that the number one thing that will make a person even consider following Jesus, or I guess there's two things. One is listening without judging, and the second is not cornering them to make a decision. So basically not pressuring them to draw any conclusions. And so our biggest thing is I want to create a space, not that we shy away from Jesus, because we have this talk of hey, we love Jesus, we talk a lot about Jesus. And if you come hang out with us, you're going to hear a lot about this person, right? But you're also going to experience his love. You're also going to experience his compassion for you. And so we want to create stuff where they can really get in tight with their small group leader or other kids in their small group. And then the next week, we'll introduce a topic and let them talk about it and ask questions. Then the next week we start preaching and start doing worship and a lot of those things. I think it was David Hertwick who wrote a book, Good Kids, Big Events, Matching T-Shirts, talked about communicating from the pulpit as if there's always new people in the room, and structuring the way that you talk to people, even in worship moments and prayer moments. There's always people in the room who need further explanation. We can't always assume they know what's going on just because, we got a bunch of church kids. So when we do prayer, we talk about what prayer is. And non-churchies, type language. We talk about worship, or singing, right? We'll talk about what that looks like, as if there's a bunch of people there that have never been there before. And that's been a really good practice of ours. Let me give you guys a couple more things. I've already said some of this stuff, but I feel here's a couple of metrics for successful events. I already talked about how I have parents begging for the next event calendar. That's a good sign. When students actually invite their friends to events, and I've been everywhere in between. Sometimes you beg your students, please invite your friends, and they don't. And then sometimes it's oh man, are all these people with you? Oh my God, that sort of thing. I've had you ever just have a whole football team show up and you're these are children? Oh my God, what are we feeding these guys, So when they start inviting their friends and those friends start attending your church, man, that's our hope for events. Let me see here. Oh, I love this one. When some of your students come into your gatherings and excitedly ask, what are we doing tonight? Or when's the next fill in the blank type thing. That's a good sign. That means they love what you're doing. Here's a big one we don't often talk about. When your facilities and your support staff, whether that be your church administrators or your custodians or whoever, thank you for cleaning up after yourself and communicating and organizing things so well. Man, if you can get in good with your facilities people, they will bend over backwards for you. But you got to clean up your own mess and stuff, right? You got to take good care. I feel no matter where I've gone, I've always come in with, and let's just change this about youth ministry. I've always come into a new position where everybody assumed I was going to make a huge mess and break things. And it's I'm not here to destroy the building, please let me help you. So our guiding principle on events, really, if I were to boil it down to one thing, is if we don't want to do it as leaders, then why are we doing it? And I understand that there's things that oftentimes we do in church that we just need to do. And it might not be everybody's favorite things. But I've learned that if we are excited and my leaders want to be there and I want to be there and we're doing stuff that we love doing, our kids are going to capture that energy, man. They're going to run with it. I worked at a church a number of years ago where I had to break off a culture that was an expectation of failure. Let me tell you about this event, okay? Very first event. You just got to know, how bad it was, okay? Very first event I ever did, we called it Rocktoberfest, which was years ago, by the way, so don't judge me. Called it Rocktoberfest. I somehow talked Thomas Family Farms, which is in Snohomish, to give us their entire farm on Halloween night. So we had the whole place to ourselves, guys. Corn maze, the whole barn. They had a haunted house situation next door, zombie paintball, and we went in and we set up a bunch of other games. We had free food, we had desserts, we had a big old costume contest. It was an overnight event. We watched a movie on the big screen. We did a live Clue reenactment kind of a deal, a murder mystery thing. All this stuff, man, it was rad. I poured a ton of time and energy into it. And I could tell you from the moment I walked through the door before we even got on the bus, the look on all my kids' faces, even though they were painted like a clown, it was a sad clown, okay? They just knew this was going to suck. They'd already determined in their hearts and minds this event's going to suck. Anyway, we haven't even left the church yet. And I had to break off this culture where failure was an expectation. Now here's the thing, here's what I didn't know. And this is not to dishonor the person that came before me. I just know that this happens when we start to feel either burned out or we start to check out. The previous youth pastor was not communicating well, creating events like a week in advance, canceling events and then not telling anybody. So like parents and families would show up to the church and they're like, when does this thing start? Oh, actually we canceled it. Oh, when were you going to tell people that? We put something on Facebook. I was like, oh man. And this became a trend. And so even though we had like, dude, oh God, that whole event was a nightmare, you guys. It was terrible. I remember I was standing up on a ladder screaming through a microphone like, come on guys, let's do this. And everybody's just like, it was like literal zombies now that I think about it. So we had to break that off of our students. You'd be like, look, hey, I understand you've been through some tough times, but your brightest and best days are not behind you. They are in front of you, you guys. We're gonna shake up this town. It's gonna be awesome, I promise you. So yeah, one of the things was that we had to do stuff that we were excited about. That's right, that came full circle. See, I did it. Finally did it. We had to create stuff that we were excited about, that we loved doing. They did this thing called Firehouse Fridays, where essentially they locked all the kids in the church overnight and just like locked them in and then left. I kid you not. And so there would be like human-sized holes in the drywall where a kid went like through the wall and stuff in our church. And I was like, no wonder this place already hates me and I just started. So yeah, we had to cancel stuff like that. And then on sermon series, I do have a couple of notes on that as well. We do map out the general direction, topic, and main verse for all the sermons in the series as we're launching it. And then as we refine those messages, I'll put in the small group questions to Planning Center in advance so that my small group leaders can be prepared before they even show up and kind of sort those things out in their own brain. And then at the end of every sermon series, we do a reflection night. So that's kind of a couple things that we do. Any other thoughts or questions? How long am I supposed to go? I don't know either. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Good job, babe.
Cool. All right. So we got a couple people here. Hey Siri, pick a number between 1 and 5. 5. So, Ethan, my man, you're going to get Essentialism.
Sweet.
It's a good read, bro. You're going to kick out of that. And then, let's see. Who's 706? That's an interesting area code. 706 964 0447? 760. I'm a little bit dyslexic, so just kidding. All right. And then who's the 509 number? That's right in my alley. 509 990 5616. All right, Pastor Maria, that's yours. Cool. Well, hey guys, I am gonna send this stuff to you guys. When you text in that thing, it probably sent you a link back. If you want to click the link on that and continue filling out that profile, it might ask for an email address, first and last name. But that way, if you ask questions, it'll show your name and not your phone number. So you're not giving your phone number away. So thank you guys. I appreciate you. And if you have any other questions or if something comes up, I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference. And can I say a quick prayer for you guys? Let's do it. Well, Lord Jesus, we love you. God, I'm so thankful, Lord, for every ministry, every community, every church represented in this room today, Father, all the lives and families and schedules, God, that we get to influence and that we get to participate with. And I just pray, God, that you would give us creative ways, not just to draw people in, but to communicate the hope and the love of Jesus through our events, through our churches. Help us, God, to be creative on those nights when we hope that students are inviting their friends. But God, also give us the wisdom to create spaces that when we do invite their friends, we don't regret it. Like, oh man, I was supposed to fix that a month ago. Help us, Lord, to work ahead, to put in the work right up front, God, and then enjoy the fruits of our labor so that when something comes up, when a student reaches out to us or a pastor needs us to do something or there's crisis or there's a fun event like a football game or a choir concert, God, we can attend those things. We could be more available. We could be more engaged. We could be more present in the lives of our people. So I just pray a blessing, God, over every leader here and their families and be with us throughout the rest of this weekend. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.